Thank you so much, Ananth, for joining. So, should we just start off with understanding, you know, they're really rolling out the red carpet for President Trump. So, does that in itself signify that this is really a major meeting, turn of events, maybe, between the two rival nations?
I think so, and I think it speaks to the importance that they are both placing on the visit. So, when President Trump arrived in Beijing in the evening on Wednesday, and Vice President of China, Han Zheng, met him at the airport, which is something that they haven't done for other leaders, even for Vladimir Putin, which kind of shows the kind of unusual gestures that they are taking for Trump. And earlier today, I very sort of visited the neighborhood where Trump will be staying, the Four Seasons Hotel in Beijing, and they've essentially closed off a whole block, a neighborhood for Trump. And I think the whole city is kind of bracing itself for these unusual arrangements, which speak to the importance that they are putting on the visit. And I think they understand that these things work well with Trump.
So, China and President Xi's grip on the country has also changed a lot since Trump last visited. And even in the past year or so, we've seen those changes. They're dominating several spaces like rare earth minerals, the tech space, especially AI. So, how is this change going to affect the dynamic between the two leaders? And more importantly, how they discuss the trade situation?
Yeah, I think there is a change dynamic for sure, and would have been different if, as Trump had hoped, he was supposed to be in Beijing in end March, where he thought he would arrive after they just accomplished this quick regime change or change of leader in Venezuela. And I think they were under the impression that the same thing would have happened in Iran. I think he thought he would arrive in Beijing having accomplished these two things with two countries that were obviously close partners of China. And instead, much of the discussion in Beijing in the last week has been about Iran showing the limits of US power and speaking to this perception that people in China have had in the last decade since the financial crisis of US decline. So that's kind of the context. But having said that, China still needs America for many things, especially Beijing's very concerned about the export controls, its access to chips. And that's something that definitely will be on the agenda. And of course, you also have people like NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, who's accompanied Trump for this visit. So for China, they're very, I think they're quite aware that they need the US for many things, just as the US needs China too. And I think Trump will be speaking, of course, on critical minerals and getting China to buy more US products, especially agricultural products. So I think both have something that they're looking for.
And beyond, trade and the war in Iran, there are a couple of other things that we expect to see on the agenda, like the AI race, Taiwan, green energy, things like that. So, what kind of do you think is the priority here?
I think the shorthand, an easy way for people to kind of capture the priorities is the three T's, which is trade for the US and for China as well to some degree, Taiwan, which is a big concern for China, and they'd want to see a US kind of commitment to its old policy. And finally, technology, which I think is the new kind of frontier in the relationship. And you mentioned AI. I think people are generally skeptical about whether there can be a meeting of minds given that it's obviously for both countries, it's not just economics. It's something that's so crucial to their national strategies, and it's something that they're very suspicious of the other. There is apparently going to be some discussion on AI, but I think expectations are quite low in terms of how far that will go. So I think in priorities, the three T's will still be at the top of the list.
And what will it take for both Trump and Xi to consider this summit a success?
I think the bar is quite low, and expectations have been quite low going into it. I've listened to some Chinese experts saying that for China, the optics of Trump coming is something for them that has value in of itself. I think there's discussions of Xi committing to a return visit going to the US in August or September. But I also think that if there are concrete outcomes on trade, on technology, we'll have to wait and see what that is. On both sides, people are aware that this visit isn't going to fix the relationship. There's so many long-term structural differences, and I think people expect the rivalry to only increase going forward.